they're saying workforce accelerator, but it's kind of a bait and switch whereby our students become the consumers of this technology. And coding jobs are projected to shrink because of the coding abilities of generative AI.
What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
The AI industry may have already peaked. By now, we know that AI is a marketing term. AI is not artificial intelligence because intelligence requires that something be a living thing with the power of deduction and choice. An MIT report released in July found that when businesses incorporated AI, it didn't improve business or increase profits in 95% of cases. A lot of the techno-optimism that existed when this current wave of AI tools was rolled out a couple of years ago, it no longer exists among the capitalists. We also know how predatory the tech industry can be. There's the planned obsolescence that keeps us buying new iPhone when the differences between the new and old models is close to zero. There is also the forcing of certain branded tech onto students, people when they're young. My earliest memory of this being the Apple IIe computers we had in the computer lab when I was in elementary school, public elementary school in California. And that kind of prepped me for a life used to Apple products. And these are some of the reasons why only a handful of senior administrators and a single student were consulted in closed-door meetings that resulted in a big contract for ChatGPT Edu with the California State Universities that was announced in February. ChatGPT Edu is the version of ChatGPT that is packaged for educational use. The tech industry can't find somebody who wants to buy this technology on its own merits and usefulness. Why not shove it down the throats of professors and students? Martha Kenney is going to talk to me about a piece that she wrote with another Martha Lincoln. Both are professors at SF State. They wrote a piece titled "Let Them Eat Large Language Models, Artificial Intelligence and Austerity in the Neoliberal University." And their piece also deals with a core problem that prevents AI from being very useful in schools, which is that the values embedded in AI tech don't align with and are in some ways antithetical to the values of critical humanities education, higher education, originality, academic freedom, creativity, critical thinking, all of these things that AI is at odds with as the biggest plagiarism tool that we've ever seen in the history of the human race. Thank you to John for becoming a member at patreon.com/sadfrancisco. When this episode goes live, there should be some fresh merch available there at the Patreon. Also post there about some upcoming events, including the Howard Zinn Book Fair and Miss Major's Memorial here in the Bay. Thank you, Martha, for coming on to the podcast. Wanted to start by asking, at what point in the past couple of years were you so irritated as AI has been forced down all our throats that you felt like you needed to write an article about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it will provide some context for the project as well. So I am the co-founder of the Science, Technology, and Society Hub at San Francisco State University. And we have a National Science Foundation grant, and we do thematic years on topics related to science and social justice. So we had a thematic year on viral politics, thinking COVID-19 and HIV/AIDS together. We're having one right now that's on alternative energy and environmental justice. And last year, our theme was algorithms, automation, AI, and social justice. And that was a topic that I didn't know much about when we pitched it as a theme year. But I was really excited to work on it because it was really timely. And so my colleague, Martha Lincoln, who's a associate professor in anthropology at SF State, we were both part of the leadership team that year. And so we basically just started texting each other annoying articles about generative AI, and kind of, and so we were very worried, for example, about how AI decision making was being used in, healthcare, housing, to determine who gets benefits, to determine who can get employed, to determine who can get credit. So we were doing a lot of back and forth about that. And at the same time, I was chair of Women and Gender Studies at San Francisco State University in like a terrible budget crisis. And what had just happened was that Sonoma State in January 2025, Sonoma State decided to cut 6 of its departments and fire 46 professors. And one of the departments that was cut was the Women and Gender Studies department.
Right.
So I was trying to navigate through this like terrible budget moment. I was already thinking about AI and social justice. And then in February 2025, everyone, all the faculty, all the students, all the staff get an email in our inbox about this deal that the CSU had made with OpenAI to spend $17 million on ChatGPT Edu during the budget crisis.
Yeah.
And and that was a shock because we had not heard about it. And it was also really scary to see where we were seeing colleagues getting laid off. We were seeing departments being cut. At San Francisco State, there were no tenure track faculty layoffs, but there were lecturer faculty layoffs. So we were seeing our lecturer faculty, who are valued colleagues, for sometimes decades and decades, not being able to continue with their jobs. And so finding out that there's $17 million lying around somewhere that they could use for ChatGPT Edu was really scary. So we did a Public Records Act request to find out everything that we could about this deal, and to start writing op-eds, speaking to the media, and then eventually writing an academic article about the dangers that generative AI, so we're talking about like these general purpose chatbots like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, Grok, the dangers that general purpose chatbots pose to higher education.
Yeah. I have a friend, Brooke, who's been on this podcast a few times, who was at that department at Sonoma State that got shut down. And then, again, like you said, we find out, there's all of this money for this thing that is totally unproven as far as like its usefulness, its utility. But somehow the CSU has tons of money to dedicate to basically subsidizing this like big tech sort of, we're not sure if this is actually useful in any way. We're not sure if this is going to help faculty or students. But somehow we need it. we just need it.
That's one of the things about the general purpose chatbots that's really important to stress, is that these have not been trained at all for any educational purposes, or any specific purposes at all. So, for instance, things that we care about in an academic setting, like citing sources and verifying information, like it doesn't know how to do that. Nobody trained it to do that. So why we would think this is good software to introduce into a university is kind of beyond me. And it's called ChatGPT Edu,
Right.
but it's just the same as ChatGPT 4.0. There's
Right.
nothing special. There's no special educational features about this technology. The only difference, like the reason why we paid for it instead of just told people to use the free version, is because of the security and privacy features that they're selling us. So basically, according to the contract that we got through this PRA request, the OpenAI can't use our data for training purposes. It can't sell our data. All the data is supposed to be secure and private. But what's really interesting is I took a training, like a AI literacy training offered by the university, and they told us not to put secure information into ChatGPT Edu. So they're not even really sure,
Right.
like whether, like we wouldn't know whether OpenAI was breaking their side of the contract. So even the AT department at the academic technology department at SF State is a little bit skeptical about the terms of this contract.
Yeah, and I mean, I personally wouldn't trust Sam Altman, the OpenAI head, with my data or assumptions around whether that data is private, being up on the internet, and not going to be indexed by his tools and used and like plagiarized. I can see why there would be concern there. Do you use anything AI like in your personal life?
No, I don't use AI, though I've used it a little bit more than some of the other people who are on this, on the critical AI side of things. I've used it to see its capacities.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking about like bringing it into an educational environment, like what can it do and what can't it do? So I'll put in like my assignments to see what ChatGPT Edu will come up with. Or if I think of like a task that would be like very time consuming, that I'm like, well, maybe ChatGPT Edu can do this in a more efficient way. So I'll try it and I'll be like, oh, this is actually no more efficient than the way that I would have done it myself. So just understanding the capacities and understanding what it can do and what it can't do has been helpful for me. I was actually just at Davis the other day giving a talk in a women and gender studies class, and I asked the students that. I asked, what do you use these chatbots for? And a lot of them were talking about tasks that they do associated with their classes. Like if they have a chemistry problem, they'll ask ChatGPT to kind of come up with the different steps to solving it so that they can learn those steps themselves. And so I was like, is it good at this? And a lot of the students said, oh no, there's like errors all the time. And I'm like, would you know whether it was giving a correct answer or an incorrect answer? And a lot of them were like, no. So it's people are relying on it to do tasks that it has not been trained for. And in fact, it hasn't been trained to do any tasks other than to create language that approximates human language.
Right.
And,
yeah. Totally. Oh, yeah.
And I was just reading an article that was talking about this as being like epistemological indifference, like rather than a hallucination. It's like that the machine actually doesn't care whether or not the answer is true, for it to actually be fulfilling its function, which is to generate human-like language.
Right. It's fine as long as it just sounds like it could be true, not like whether or not it is true. That's not the important part to ChatGPT. Even like the Google search results, like I never take that at face value. Like the AI summaries that we get at Google, it's always like, oh, I'm gonna have to check that.
One way for this technology to be better is to be trained to say, I don't know. when you ask it a question that
Right.
it doesn't know the answer to. However, that would make the technology way less engaging, right? You wouldn't want to continue to use it if it kept telling you, like, I can't do that, I don't know this. And that can be really that like they've decided for engagement over like truth or verifiable information or actually being good at any of these specific tasks.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the medium of podcasts is like kind of parallel in that like you say something with confidence, and as it is true, whether or not you know it or not, and there's a good likelihood that the person listening is just going to accept that as fact. Um, it's not good. Um, uh, I was wondering, like this, like AI first started, like you know, the term AI, like the term using the term intelligence and attributing it to this technology is itself like a misnomer and some a kind of like marketing language, because this isn't like a sentient being that we're talking about. This is not something that's like deducing you know facts using thought processes that are like similar to humans. It's just it's a bunch of guesses based on pulling a bunch of material from the internet. I remember my first coming across it though was like hearing about people using it to like, you know, plagiarize or turn in like a quick and easy paper without any thoughts. But just wondering, like, as you were doing this research and as you've been teaching over the past couple of years, if there's any particularly obscene ways that you've encountered AI being used in the context of a college course.
I should say that in terms of the cheating narratives that you'll see in the media about students, I haven't personally seen any students using generative AI in that cynical way. Like, I don't want to do my work. I'm just going to hand in work that was created by ChatGPT. Like what I've seen is, and this is the case, you know, in the CSU system, is we have a lot of students who, you know, we have a lot of first generation students, we have a lot of historically marginalized students. Most of our students are working, you know, they're working full time, they're commuting, there's things going on in their lives. And I've really only seen students use generative AI when they've been in crisis. And so that there's just no way that they can complete their work. And that's a structural problem. Like we really need students to have the opportunity. We need education to be affordable or free. And we need students to have that opportunity to really, you know, engage with all of the class material and to get everything they possibly can out of their education. And I think our students at SF State are that's mostly what they're trying to do, but their structural circumstances mean that it's often really challenging. So I think about like what it means to introduce a technology like this into a system in a budget crisis with students who are overburdened. And like how that both cheats students out of an education, like if faculty use it for course prep or making up assignments or grading, then we're cheating the students out of an education. And if the students use it, they are not able to like learn those skills themselves. So it's just kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that reframe of like what the media depicts as being like, you know, a bunch of villainous students like concocting like plans to turn in trash to their professors to
answer your question though about like the egregious uses, so OpenAI doesn't actually know what ChatGPT Edu might be good for. Like they don't have any specific ideas about its educational purposes. So that what they're doing is they're partnering with universities to create these challenges whereby faculty can apply for grants,
Mm.
where the faculty member will be tasked with integrating the generative AI into their classroom. So like if as a women and gender studies professor, I was like, okay, I have this class that is like on science fiction. It's on like intersectional approaches to science fiction. So I'm gonna apply for this grant and get up to like $60,000 to figure out how to integrate it into my class. So basically they're subcontracting faculty to find use cases for their technology.
So absurd.
And you can
So
see
absurd.
the list online of like in the CSU who won these grants, and like some of them are pretty dystopian. Like one of them is a theater class where students create a one-act musical in collaboration with generative AI.
Oh my
And
God.
that is a
So
personal
dumb.
hell. Like I would like if you have made me go to the performances of these musicals that are created by AI, like I know that I have died and this is my punishment.
Yeah, I know. Like initially, there was all this like the novelty of AI when 2 years ago, people like feeding weird prompts into it. That's completely dead. Like the
Yeah.
novelty is completely gone.
Yeah. I did that. I was doing that with the images, like Mid-Journey, because I thought it was
Sure,
like fun to see what it would come
totally.
up with if you gave it these like vague prompts. Like I like AI and robots and stuff that are weird, that like come up with really surprising results that like have nothing to do with like human purposes. And so the very early AI stuff was kind of in that zone. But now it's like just made to be the like most banal, standardized, sycophantic like versions of like human communication. And that's not fun at all.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who like some of your work is around sci-fi, I imagine like you're into the genre, and this is probably not the version of robotics or AI that you were envisioning, like reading speculative fiction years before this even came along.
Yeah, no, there's I recently read a novel from 2002 that I had never read before called Feed, and by M.T. Anderson. And it is about a future where like everyone has the internet plugged into their brains. That's
Mm,
like, and it's like basically like trying to sell them all the time, and it's like dumbed everyone down, and they speak this like very basic version of
okay.
like slang. And they're all these teenagers, and they're like buying stuff like as the world crumbles around them.
Uh-huh.
And
Sounds
I, as like written in 2002, I think it's like really prescient. And I think like the more of our lives we give over to these technologies that are just made to sell things, the more impoverished, reality becomes for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And along those lines, a word that you use in this piece that you wrote that to describe the adoption of AI by college administrations is the word uncritical.
Hmm.
How does something like these technologies that are about like selling people more shit, like get foisted on students and professors without administrations questioning why?
Yeah, I think it's just this like charisma that's associated with technology, especially, we're in San Francisco, right next to Silicon Valley. This idea about the future that like everyone wants to get on board of. Like the kind of the most successful marketing narrative they have going right now is that the AI future is inevitable. And it's
Mm,
like,
mhm.
again, as somebody who works on speculative fiction, it's like, well, the future is like a contested terrain. And like we should decide our own futures and not be told what the future is by these companies that benefit from there being an AI-driven future. So I feel like we're getting like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we pretend that the AI-driven future is inevitable, it will be inevitable. It will happen. And so I think the uncriticality is the administration accepting this marketing narrative as some kind of truth about a big shiny future that we need to be an early adopter. We need to get on the ground floor. It's going to be good PR for us. And not saying like, wait a minute, who benefits and who suffers in these kinds of equations. And that's what people in my field, science and technology studies, were looking at the politics of, science, technology, and medicine. And you've got to ask, like, technology can be wonderful and, helpful, and, it can connect with people's what people care about, but it can also make our world awful and dystopian, and for like some more than others, right? These technologies, especially in the way that surveillance and automation affect marginalized communities in much more serious and concrete ways. And so if we don't ask critical questions, we are accepting these kinds of inequalities, and we're like baking them in for like generations to come.
Yeah. Another term that you use to describe the AI rollout at universities is reputation laundering. How is this wave of AI technology how is the hype around it? How is it sort of marketing, PR? How is ChatGPT Edu sort of a PR project for both AI and academia?
Yeah, I think OpenAI has a lot more to gain from this contract than we do. I think for us, it's tough to tell because we did get these Public Record Act request documents, but we still don't really have a good sense of like who was in the room when that decision was made. And that would give us a lot of good information, because we could kind of tell who's scratching whose back and how. There's the CSU AI committee that we thought was a part of the decision, and we recently talked to somebody who was on that committee, and he said they were not part of the decision. So the room was even more closed than what we had originally thought. But I mean, if I had to guess, I would say, the CSU thinks that this is good PR for them because it makes them seem forward looking, it makes them seem tech savvy. Maybe they see it as a way to lessen the budget crisis by increasing enrollment. Those are guesses on my side. But in terms of OpenAI, there's two aspects to it. One is that education is like a very lucrative market for them, and they want to become infrastructure, so that they're locked in as vendors forever, and we have to keep paying for it because all of this is an expensive technology that is like they're having a tough time monetizing it. Totally. And so education is a great market, and we've seen that in a lot of ed tech. If we can sell software and hardware and whatever to the universities, and that's a built-in market. But then in terms of reputation, it associates OpenAI with education in a positive light. Like especially they like to tout their contracts with like Oxford University and Columbia University, these elite institutions that have cultural cachet. And the CSU actually has the largest contract with OpenAI of any university system in the world right now, and they never tout it. They never talk about their deal with the CSU. It's the elite institutions that they, want to be able to associate themselves with. And I think that's, Oxford's deal with OpenAI is actually one of the most baffling to me, because I think Oxford has a lot to lose reputation-wise by being on the vanguard here.
Yeah, it seems like everybody who has any kind of collaboration with OpenAI, I want to ask them in 5 years, how do you feel about that partnership that you had going with Sam Altman? So let's come back to that. The CSUs, at least with the ChatGPT Edu contract, like, you know, as we talked about, and we're not sure if, you know, this is actually the case, but you're signing a contract saying that ChatGPT, OpenAI, is not going to use the data of students and faculty, and it's going to stay private. But some universities are signing contracts with OpenAI or Anthropic, some of these other big companies that allow a lot of their resources on campus. You know, like the contents of whole libraries to be trained with for ChatGPT. What's the benefit to students or faculty there?
There is no benefit. The most high profile example that I can think of, you know, that is the example of what you just said, is Oxford, and they are digitizing some of their library, some of the public domain part of their library, as part of this deal with OpenAI. But actually, just before we talked, I saw your question, so I wanted to look it up. And I was trying to look up the details. I'm like, why do we need AI for this? Like, we've been digitizing libraries for, you know, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And I could not find a quick answer to that question. So I think it's what you said, which is maybe OpenAI has given them money to digitize the library, but
Yeah.
in doing so, they have given them access to that as training data.
Right.
That's again a guess, but more so than it happening in libraries, what we're seeing as, like, in academia, there are these like big journal conglomerates. They're like Springer and Taylor and Francis and Elsevier, and they own all these academic journals where knowledge is published. But they don't do anything. They're just parasites.
Right.
And one of their new strategies for monetizing is to sell all of our articles, you know, professors' articles, which, you know, we were not paid to write, to sell them as training data for AI, or to build their own AI. And publishers, academic publishers, are doing the same. Like my colleague Martha Lincoln, who I did this research with, she has a book published with Bloomsbury, which is a British publisher, academic publisher, and they sent her an email being like, "Hey, can we sell your book as part of an AI data training set?" And it's going to help the future, and it's going to make, you know, AI more accurate, and this and that. And she actually took she took a Zoom meeting with them to be like, what's the deal here? And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just another way to monetize scholars' work. And there may be like a small royalty payout, but not very much at all. So it's, you know, it's just a cash grab by publishers. And like I said, these big parasitic journal conglomerates. And this is work, you know, that we do as part of our employment at research universities. And that these companies, like, you know, they don't pay us to, you know, when an academic writes a book, they're not paid for it. They get some royalties from the sale of it, but, I mean, you know, you don't get minor, like a $500,000 book contract or anything like that. No. So everyone's trying to squeeze all of this value out of the work that professors are doing, and then on the other end, they're selling it back to us in a way that like might actually replace our labor in some ways, or devalue our labor, or de-skill our jobs.
Yeah, it's dastardly. And And then, along those lines, wanted to see if you could just briefly school the listeners on how AI is antagonistic towards labor.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key issues here, is the way that AI is used as a labor breaker. So like Bender and Hannah in their book, The AI Con, they make this argument really well, which is like we're told that AI is a labor saving device and that it will make all of our jobs more efficient. But in the end, it's a labor breaking device because what it does is it shows employers that a machine could do our job at a fraction
Right.
of the cost.
Right.
So it de-skills and devalues labor. And that we see that in lots of different sectors right now. In education, you can see they're already trying to replace tutors and advisors with generative AI. But you could also imagine a future where the delivery of the teaching is done mostly by an AI with like human babysitters who are paid a lot less to babysit the AI than they would be to teach the class. And so like part of this is that it's changing the conditions of our labor. So creating all these like new and burdensome tasks that we have to do as part of our job, the correcting AI, the babysitting AI. In the short term and in the long term, it might create the conditions where human workers in education are replaced by generative AI that is, not able to deliver the same quality of education, but, it saves the universities enough money that they think that it's lucrative. But, I think it's been at the center of a lot of recent labor struggles. I'm thinking about like the Hollywood writers' strike, for
Right.
example. And a lot of people are paying attention to like the risks that generative AI poses to their sector. So there's a really good open letter by like a lot of best-selling authors about not letting generative AI into publishing, and they have like a long list of different ways that it might enter, saying that the publishing industry should absolutely refuse to do that, and like things like you might not expect, like for example having audiobooks read by humans and not by AI. So like they thought of like a lot of really different things that it could harm. And so I think like this is really an important issue for labor movements. And we've seen like a lot of really good labor movement pushback on generative AI, like I was mentioning, the writers' strike. But if we kind of go beyond generative AI, you look at like there was a really good resistance to automated vehicles being introduced in the port of LA. And the workers were successful at getting automated vehicles like not used for like hauling cargo in the port. And there's some really good coalitional organizing in San Diego against smart streetlights, which are like not streetlights at all. They're just like they don't provide any light, but they just surveil people. And especially in racialized communities, they are, causing surveillance and over policing and, having really negative effects on communities. So I think like organizing against the labor aspects of generative AI is very important, as is these things like I was saying, like surveillance and AI based decision making that are affecting the lives of marginalized communities more than they are, professors in universities.
The other thing that I think about with labor that I don't think gets brought up very often in media reporting about the topic is how much the tech industry benefits from, you know, the uh, the educated students coming from public universities, who are trained in the public university to become their future employees, and you know, write the code, because there's still people who are going to be needed to write this code. Can't all be robots. Uh, the public university is sort of the place that future employees and consumers arise from. And yeah, wondering if you could, if you had any thoughts about that aspect, that I think gets, yeah, like it's like a more silent, invisible aspect of the labor conversation here.
Yeah, I think that with our students, our CSU students, these tech companies are less interested in having our students as workers, and they're more interested in having them as customers for life.
Yes.
So there is this workforce accelerator that is part of the CSU AI Empowered University plan, and it has like a board of directors that has, you know, everyone from big tech, you know, has NVIDIA and Adobe and Microsoft and OpenAI. But it's really unclear what this workforce accelerator is supposed to do. And there are currently no metrics for deciding like whether or not this is a successful endeavor. Like there's no accountability at all in terms of this workforce accelerator. And I'm like, if you want to be like accelerating our students into the future workforce, you know, commit to hiring them. You know, I would not necessarily counsel a student to go into big tech. But I think having job opportunities for them is a good thing. However, I just like, I'm so cynical about this. Like, I don't think they want to hire CSU students. I think they want to hire people from Stanford and MIT and, you know, these kinds of things. And so they're saying workforce accelerator, but it's kind of a bait and switch whereby our students become the consumers of this technology. And coding jobs are projected to shrink because of the coding abilities of generative AI. So, you know, they're shooting their own sector in the foot like, a lot. And I think tech workers are going to have to organize. Go ahead.
Unionization is key. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think about like all the money that people spent on coding boot camps like 7 or 8 years ago, that these camps no longer exist, or not boot camps, but these schools, these like coding schools where you don't have to go to you know, a like 4-year university. You just go and learn some like basic coding skills, and that was supposed to be like feed you into the big tech companies. But like you said, those big tech companies were overwhelmingly interested in hiring people from the Stanfords and the Harvards, etc. So a lot of those people ended up like with a certificate from these coding schools that is essentially useless.
Yeah. And in fact, the CSU had an AI camp for our students this summer. And one of the things they asked the students to do in this camp was get AI to solve administrative problems that the CSU has. So they wanted the students who were working for free by going to this AI camp to find ways to use this tool in order to solve their own problems using the chatbot they had already paid for. So it's like pretty Pretty awful.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like the camp as a way to like skill people, I don't think the students learned anything that was going to be specifically like useful in a career in the tech industry at that camp.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like not the first time that, tech has done this, that it has preyed upon big institutions, like public institutions, like universities. I wonder if you remember when the massive open online courses, or MOOCs, were introduced about 10 years ago into, I know that they were introduced at certain UCs, and they were supposed to be this thing that like revolutionized learning. I don't think that happened.
No, I think universities have long just been seen as a market for tech, and also education, like including universities, but including K through 12 education are, it's just the idea, and the educational institutions want to associate themselves with technology, with the future, and these companies have like very good marketing narratives where they're like, hey, you buy this and you'll be more efficient. You'll be able to teach more students. You'll, have all these features. And the universities have sort of bought into it hook, line, and sinker. And what that means is that it's always like, taking a bite out of our budget, but in a way that is not necessarily like delivering any value to us. And some of the platforms that we buy and use, like we are using Canvas, for example, for like, putting our readings online and stuff like that. And that's okay. Canvas is, functional. I don't mind it. But we have these other tools, like we have this thing called Academic Works that we use for students to apply for scholarships and to give them scholarships. And it has like a 40-page user manual that like you need to use in order to figure out how to do anything. Like there's not even just like a button for like award scholarship to student. And it's just better to do it completely analog,
Right.
just have the students hand us the application in person. We'll read the paper copies and we'll tell, the bursar to disperse the amount. So I think the universities have kind of been suckers for buying all of these platforms, for buying all this kind of failed ed tech. And in this case, they're, with OpenAI, they're paying for something that like doesn't even have an educational purpose. And when I was talking to the head of academic technology last week, he was saying like, oh, well, this is just the first phase. We're going to have these general purpose chatbots and we don't know whether they're going to be helpful or not. And then we're going to get all these specific ones like tailored for education. It's like, well, let's skip phase one, right? Like we don't need this. But then for phase two, we should compare these technologies to existing technologies or not using technologies at all.
Analog,
we should look at the budget, and decide whether or not, to make these purchasing decisions rather than just be like drawn in by the hype. Like we're paying for hype right now. And, if it's useful to have a machine learning tool that works for specific, quantitative methodologies or something, there's probably already tools for that. So you can say like, okay, well, is this one based on machine learning better or worse? And does it cost more or less? And should we buy it rather than just like, oh, we need this.
Right.
So if this is just phase one, there's a second phase that we need to be ready for, which is like the kind of ed tech scams, but we're not even there yet. We're at this, the chatbots don't even don't even have an educational use.
Yeah. EdTech scams, do you mean like, I know that something that's been happening lately is like people have been having trouble registering for classes because there'll be like bots signing up for classes,
Whoa.
or people who never intend to go to the class because they're just applying for like the financial aid. And then so you have like situations where there's like 0 spots for all these prereq classes that people need to take that are being filled by people who have never intended to take them.
That's really interesting. I'm going to try and read more about that. No, I just meant for like ed tech scams, just like, software that's kind of janky that we don't really need. And it's just, there's like one company and they make this one platform and they sell it to everyone. And then just because that's the system, we like this academic works, it would take a lot to get rid of it. So is it better to have this really bad platform with a 40-page user manual than it is to switch to a new platform? Yeah. And I think they've just decided that like, okay, we're going to buy this. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, well, we're still stuck with it.
Yeah. It feels like should you just be using more open source stuff? Like, anyway. So thank you for spending all this time. The last question that I had has to do with something that we spoke about at the beginning of the conversation, which is like how the future is still contested terrain. You speak to in this piece, like refusal as, a sort of way to push back. Like the simplest answer is, refusal. And we're already seeing examples, some of them you list, of refusal of AI tech at colleges. I'm wondering if you could speak to a couple of those examples and generally like where we should be focusing our ire. Who are the major villains?
Yeah, so refusal is a tactic that we recommend in our article, rather than this kind of town hall model that's been suggested. Like our academic technology people, they're like, oh, well, we'll get together all these panels of people with differing opinions about this technology and we'll find a way forward. But we argue that the extractivism that's involved with generative AI, which is like exploitative labor conditions in like training the AIs, global South countries like Kenya. Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI, is really great for explaining those out. The natural resources, thinking about these the AI servers being in these like mega campuses that are very energy and water intensive. And then also the extractivism in terms of being like trained on all of our data and all of our writing, and some of it copyrighted writing that was like illegally obtained by these companies. So we argue that because of the inherent extractivism of this technology, that refusal is our best option. And not to say like, oh, let's find some ethical uses, or let's make this software better, or, let's tailor it specifically for education. Instead, just to say, no, this has real potential harms for education. It has harms for the academic workplace. And it has potential harms for students. I'll put in a plug. My co-author, Martha Lincoln, has an op-ed out yesterday in Inside Higher Education, which is about the mental health harms of chatbots, talking about the use talking about the incidence of AI psychosis and also suicidal ideation that's encouraged by AI chatbots. And her argument in that article is that, with almost 500,000 students in the CSU system, it's likely that our students will have negative mental health outcomes engaging with the software that we are giving to them.
Right.
And so because of the extractivism inherent in the technology and because of this long list of potential harms, we say just refuse. And it's hard to refuse when we're being shown, this bright, AI-driven future. We're seen as Luddites, we're seen as retrograde. But I think that that's the only principled stance at this current moment. And so Martha Lincoln and I have been making contact with other faculty in the CSUs who are also interested in having the CSU system break its contract with OpenAI. And then we're also meeting with people nationally and internationally to try and create these networks. There's a really great listserv called the Library of Babel that's out of Georgetown that anyone can sign up for. And that's to people who are really concerned about the effects of generative AI in higher education. So just kind of getting people together and really starting to organize around it. And our goal is to get the CSU to not re-up their contract in June. That's when it comes up, and it seems like they will do that unless we can stop them. And we've also been involved with our labor union, the CFA, and they have an article committee where they're writing an article that would prevent the university the university system from making deals with AI firms without consulting the union. So we're kind of doing it on the union front. We're kind of coming up with different ways to organize and to protest. And who's the villain? Our proximate villain is the CSU. But I would also like, OpenAI to stop predating on education.
Yeah.
And for people to be like, okay, well, this is kind of a fun tool. It's cool that you can type something into a box and it will answer you. But we don't need this. I don't think our lives are improved at all. And we give up a lot when we decide to, let these into our lives and our workplaces.
Yeah, agree. For me, I used Siri somewhat commonly 10 years back, and it's honestly not that different of an experience for me. Having just played around with ChatGPT, I don't see that much of a difference in that. I'm still having to double check the answers. Something that I learned recently was OpenAI's sourcing, the top platform that it's pulling information from is Reddit. And then, second to that, but a trailing second is Wikipedia, which I would trust more. But Reddit, it's just not the first place I think of when I think of solid factual information. When
we were doing this critical AI literacy training, we were in these breakout groups, and one of the other professors who was in the breakout group with me is like, well, why isn't this trained to go to the best sources? Why can't it do that? And it's because it wasn't trained to do that. It was trained to create human sounding language, and it's been trained to do some specific things like not swear at you or show you pornographic images. But it has not been trained to find the best sources with the highest evidence and to say when it can't. And those are the very basic things that we need when we're teaching and learning and creating new knowledge. And it doesn't have that capacity. It may have that capacity in the future, as they become more specialized. But that doesn't mean that like a lot of the questions about, discrimination and bias and, whether these jobs can be automated at all, that doesn't address any of those concerns. It's like, oh, well, in the future, this will be better. Well, let's deal with what we've got in the present. These technologies suck. They're not good at the things that we want them to be good at, but we're still engaged because I think of that like that human desire for sociality, for like talking to another being. And when it keeps talking to you and it doesn't say, I don't know, and it doesn't shut you down, then you keep engaging. And that's good for OpenAI, but it might be bad for us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak. How can people follow your work and the work of, the group that's doing this, like pushback against the incorporation of AI at colleges?
Yeah, so I'm Martha Kenney. I'm professor of women and gender studies at San Francisco State University. I'm not on any social media, but my colleague Martha Lincoln, who's in anthropology, she's on Twitter and BlueSky as her name is Heavy Redaction. Like I said, I would also recommend checking out the library of Babel Listserv. And you can use Google Scholar to find some of our other work.
Sweet. All right. Thank you. Talk again soon. Thank you for listening to the show, and especially thank you to everyone who is contributing over at patreon.com/Sad Francisco. You're making it possible for Sad Francisco to exist. And if you're not already a member, think about joining. Again, it's patreon.com/Sad Francisco.